mesh around and warp it and have ripples go through it and stuff like that. And then finally we made a demo called Brickman, which I was never allowed to show to anybody, and still am not. It looked like old graphics because I have no graphical skill. And it was just a little brick man, and he would stand and he had a sword. And when you moved a sword in your hand, he would move his sword. And he would run around, but he was all made out of bricks. So like, it was very retro graphics looking. But the interface was neat. But it just looked so ugly that they wouldn't let me show it.
Question?
Yes?
How do you go about programming for the PS2?
I'll get to that maybe a little bit later. Okay. Well, it has you sit at a Linux workstation and you cross-compile down to the PlayStation development system. That's basically the short answer. Question?
You have a point here that there's no substitute for real-time interaction. What sort of latency will people tolerate? I mean, if you have an algorithm that needs, say, 4 frames to determine what's going on, is that too much latency for people, or what is the sort of boundaries there?
Yeah. So that point that I meant here is actually for doing research, to have like this closed loop where you can interact live, not an actual game, but just to do research is really critical. To sit there with a movie all the time or still images, that's a lot harder to do the research, I think. For your point, there's a lot of tricks you can do where you can actually delay everything in the system to be all matched up. And people suddenly can tolerate far more delay if the video of themselves is delayed to match all that other stuff. And it's really strange. As long as you don't see your lips moving when you talk, which is very distracting when it doesn't match up with the sound, you can actually go up to like much more than 1/10 of a second, which is what people normally quote as being a problem. So.
Did you use any prediction tricks? Like in control theory, people have ways of making models. Did you use any prediction tricks? Like in control theory, people have ways of making models and do essentially predictions.
Right. Yep.
Any of them?
Yeah, my background is in control, so I use as much of that as I can all the time. It's hard. People move fast compared to 30 frames per second. Our camera is actually 60 frames per second. That helps a lot, but they still can do, you move your hand.
So you mean the
There's no good.
For
yeah.
prediction study.
It's difficult. So, I'll cover some more of that later in the talk. So moving on, I worked at the R&D group for about 6 months. Then we came to the Game Developer Conference again, the one that I saw this first demo at. And the same person was giving the keynote again. This time he's my boss's boss, and he wanted to show my work. And I'm, very excited that he's going to show this, but scared too. And we just got a USB driver working for the camera like the week before. We got the code for the week before. We got the driver finished and working about 24 hours before the demo. So it's very rough, and we didn't sleep much. But it's neat because we got rid of that whole PC. Now we just have a camera plugged into the PlayStation 2, and we showed that up on the stage, and that was a big deal. But when I got there and saw the environment, it's like a huge hall, totally dark, with just spotlights. And not like nice white spotlights. They use green, red, and blue, and they mix them to get whatever color they want. And I'm like, oh no, I'm doing color tracking here. And I told him I need exactly the same lighting, because I soft calibrated so I could change things in a text file, but it's a demo, and you don't really have time to change a text file or anything. So if it doesn't work, I was happy I soft coded it in a text file. I was impressed with myself. I learned later that that's still not good enough, but. And so my boss decided he really wanted to build it up. We have toys strewn these bright colored things like this down here, strewn all over strewn all over the whole stage. And so people are like, what is that? What is this going to be about? So we really built it up. And we get up there, and I walk on stage to do the demo. Nothing. Doesn't work at all. Not at all. And I still don't know exactly why it didn't work, but one of the things is people claim the lighting was really different. I was too nervous to notice, really. My boss, when he did his practice, he wore a black suit. And then when he actually did the real talk, he wore a white shirt. And there was a huge wall of the video behind him. So his white shirt was just like bathing the whole stage with white. And that wasn't there when we practiced. And then finally the driver could have not worked or something. But we reset it, and I was at the end of the talk anyways, and he says, if you want to stay after the talk, we'll show it to you. And all the press stayed, and we ran it, and it worked perfectly. So none of the write-ups said anything bad, but all the people who were at the talk didn't see it unless they stayed. So I'll just show you that demo right now, actually. We showed that same demo later, and I'll show you the demo here. And we'll see if it works. It's pretty much the same demo. It's a different camera now, but it's basically just the driver changed out. So the demo was initially created by a graphics person to show off the graphics power of the PlayStation 2. So if you look, I can pan the camera around here, and we get all sorts of graphical effects going on. There's specular lighting, and if I move the light source, it casts shadows, even transparent shadows on the table there, over there by the lamp. No, don't change the lights. Don't change the lights. Now my calibration is at least online, but I've already calibrated, and I don't have time to do it. So what we wanted to show, we just took this demo almost as is and added in graphical user interface, or a video user interface. So now when I move the sword around with my hand, you can see it moves the sword on the screen, and we can actually tilt it, get it going. Let me switch to this room here. In this room, I can actually interact with these bubbles by moving the sword. You can chop them and then they pop, or you can just tap them and then they move. So I'll just tap some of them. And then we have this other object. If I pick up this object, this is like a ball and a chain. And this shows kind of a physical simulation. If you want to lower the lights a little bit, I don't know, can you guys see? Okay. All right. So the thing is, we're really tracking this ball in 3D because we know its size in advance. So I can actually spin the ball in the third dimension. And if I get the thing going, the chain will really start to whip around like a 3D chain should. And that kind of is subtle but very important that we can do that, you know. Otherwise, if you just have 2D, it's always moving like this. So that third dimension really makes it feel like a flail, I imagine. Never really used a flail. The other neat thing is we kind of showed with this demo, this is a rigid object and that's like a articulated object, but it still feels neat in a good control interface to do it. So you don't always have to map literally to something object that's exactly what you have. You can map it to something that just makes sense. So
It's controllable.
So now I can do them both at the same time. Really get going here. Then let's go back to this. Get going here. Then let's go back to this room. Let's see if I can do all three of them. And you can actually light that candle with the torch. And you see when I move the torch, it casts shadows on the still. You know, so this was showing that we already had this demo, already created a show, a real game like graphics. And we slapped all this stuff over the top of that and still made it run real time. When we did this demo originally, it was 30 frames per second. And when people would try it, they'd feel the lag a little bit too much. They feel it, they go, it's really precise, but it just has a little too much lag. When you got the 60 hertz camera, it feels so much better. So it's a huge difference from the 30 hertz to the 60 hertz for that kind of stuff. So switch back to the talk, please. And I showed this demonstration at all these demonstrations at the PlayStation 2 Developer Conference, only open to PlayStation 2 developers. And I described how they might be able to do all this on the PlayStation 2. And everything worked great. I was all, happy the demos worked. And I read the feedback form, and it's like, really cool demos. Why do I care? I'm like, a good demo isn't enough sometimes, right? There's no camera for the PlayStation 2. They can't make that game if they wanted to, unless they figure out how to get a camera. And so, they thought it was neat, but outside their scope. So that was a little discouraging. I showed the demonstration again at SIGGRAPH in August, and it was in the emerging technologies area, and it was really well received, and we let people actually play with it, and that was really informative to learn when other people would try it. We had somebody get so animated that the ball went shooting off into the next